Pechahelik Gaelic Hesla, the Board of Education acknowledges that we are on the traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. We would like to thank them for the privilege of living on their land and the gift of working with their children. The adoption of the agenda. Do we have someone who'd like to move the adoption? Trustee Maysack.
I'd like to motion that the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adopt the October 24th, 2023 board meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. And Trustee Caton, you second. Okay. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And carried. Board meeting minutes. Would somebody like to move the minutes? Okay, Trustee Caton.
That the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adopt September 26, 2023 regular public board meeting minutes as presented.
And Trustee Howell seconding. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And motion's carried. There is no unfinished business. And 5, record of in-camera meeting minutes and reports. The September 26, 2023 regular in-camera meeting. The October 10th, 2023 closed committee of the whole. They are noted. Number 6 is the board chair's report, and it is included in the package, so I won't read it. And number 7, presentations and delegations. And today we do have a presentation, a growth presentation from Ian Hesselbrave, the Director of Operations, and Molly Proudfoot, Capital Projects Manager.
I think I'm going to slide over here to do this, just so I can see all sides. So thank you, Molly Proudfoot, Manager Capital Projects is to my left, and we collaborated on this presentation that will pop up on the screen in just a moment. So what we're going to do is spend about 10 minutes just talking about what the future looks like in terms of enrollment. Now, there's a little bit of magic in this, and we do our best to make our predictions around what our enrollment's going to be in the short term and in the longer term. But it's very, very challenging to do because we have unforecast events and we get transitions to the community that we don't understand and things that pop up on us. But we are trying to put some discipline in the process to make sure that we have the best possible predictions we can have so that we can accommodate all learners. So we tie our work into the board strategic plan at all times. So priority number 3 for the board is organizational stability and environmental stewardship, with the goal of optimizing infrastructure to support learning, with the key results 2 there that are really germane. And one is maximizing use of school facilities to support learning, and that our long-range facility plan is in alignment with 21st century learning principles. So to do that, we need to have the space, and the space has to be appropriate for our students and our learners. And this plan, of course, influences the work of operations, and our goal is to support the education and the board in all our actions. So these statistics, I think, are really interesting, and we'll just fly through them fairly quickly here. We have 15 elementary schools. Included within that is Cumberland Community School, because it's more of an elementary school model. Our 3 high schools, 1 middle school, Lake Trail, 2 alternates, Nala-Atsi and Glacier View Secondary Center, plus distance learning facility at Nides. About 389 classrooms. It sounds quite specific because I pull this from the documents called design aid sheets, which we have to prepare for the ministry whenever a school is constructed. And it specifically states in there the number of general instruction classrooms. It's a bit tricky though, because some of the secondary spaces sub in as a classroom, but they aren't in this count. Suffice it to say, we're in and around 400 classrooms. We have 57 modulars, and the operating capacity of all our schools is 8,628 students. Again, a challenging number, because this number is derived from the operating capacity that is prepared in the documentation that goes to the ministry. What it doesn't include is things like modulars. It doesn't include any space that's been converted from one purpose to another. So this is the capacity if we were operating exactly like the ministry wished. Our enrollment right now, 10,140 students. So we have some modulars to cover that off, plus conversions of other spaces. Our forecasting, that every June you have to submit what you suspect the numbers are going to be for the following year. And it was, the growth was anticipated to be about 143 students. In actual fact, we were 241 students once the dust settled and the counts were complete in September. In certain areas of the community, we had some real surges of kids. Love this slide. I think it's a great image of where we were and where we are going right now. And if you look at this, that timeline where it's back to 2001, if you recall, we were building schools like mad because the community had grown so much in the previous 10 years. So that's when Aspirin, Brooklyn, Quinish, Q-Band, Valley View was recently completed. Those were all new construction. And then we went through a long period of decline. And that's that curve that goes over the course of 15 years. We have climbed up and beyond that in the last, and this takes us through sort of 7 years. So that's a tremendous growth rate. That's a really, and there's some influencing factors in there we understand, and some that were unexpected, right? Things like the Fort McMurray fire in 2016 actually resulted in a lot of families moving back to this community from Alberta, and that we got a surge out of that. So portables and population growth. This is a public document put together by a CBC reporter where they drew the information of how many portables the districts have and what is the growth. So they've justified it off on the left side around how many portables do you have in your district. And you can see for the Comox Valley, we sit bundled in with about 4 other districts where we're in and around 5 portables per 1,000 students. The information on the right-hand side in the green, to me, is exceptionally interesting. If you look at Sioux at 40% growth, wow, that's huge. They've had a lot of schools built there in the last 15 years. Surrey at 20% growth and Langley at 29% growth. And then the Comox Valley, 4th on that list at 17.6. That's a really big number, right, for us. And we've been accommodating that growth internally for quite a number of years. The Surrey numbers contextually too are absolutely massive. It's an 80,000 student school district. So when you grow by 20%, that's well more than our district. So the province has some real challenges. It's really indicative of the number of students that have grown province-wide. So please. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Molly to talk a little about how we generate some of our numbers.
Okay, hi everyone. We have a tight 10, so I'm gonna kind of blow through some of this stuff. But what you can see right here is housing-based enrollment forecast. So essentially, what does that mean when we get asked, oh, that new development is going to yield a lot of kids? This essentially lets us know what that a lot amounts to. So we engaged a geospatial consulting firm called Liquor Geospatial to help us with this housing-based enrollment forecast to know what students are coming out of what types of homes. So it's a data-informed enrollment forecast that uses urban growth and measures housing preferences. So that's your townhomes, your single-family homes, to predict student populations. So with that, we rely on 2 key uncontroversial assumptions. That's where we are, the city, the neighborhood, etc., what type of housing it is, so that's your duplex, your townhome, your single family, and how it relates to the changing student population. And with that, the district's growth in the near future will be driven by the availability of housing, which is not news to anybody here that we won't get new students if we don't have new housing, and we have a lot of new housing anticipated over the next 10 years. So inputs for the forecast. You have your data, that's your student residence locations, and those are Ian, can you say the word for me?
Anonymized.
Anonymized. I can't. It's such a tongue twister for me. So thanks for stepping in. So that is exactly what it means. So it's a node on a map to let us know where student X lives, and what type of house that is pulled off of the BC assessment information. And we've used that with the municipal growth forecasts. We've sat down with the municipalities. We've asked them what kind of upcoming developments do they have. So we can get that information through the geospatial consulting firm with consult from us as well as municipal planners. So what you're looking at here is a snapshot from 2021 to 2032. On the left-hand side, you have your future dwelling growth, and on the bottom, you have your future student growth. Pretty much what you can gather from this is that there's a relationship between the two of them. I think that Cumberland's an excellent example of that. It's a small area, but we have a lot of upcoming development, specifically housing, and you can see the direct relationship to the number of students, which right now we're in the ballpark of 416 in our elementary school and 705 total in the Cumberland Community School. So that's the K-9. So this is just an example of that broken down. It lets you know, okay, based off of up at the top, we see it's Cumberland. So based off of Cumberland for a new construction home, so that's less than 10 years old, you can expect to see one student come out of every 5 single family homes. And if you follow that down the line, you'll see it follows a lot of trends as far as the size of home. And when you get to duplexes, you tend to see less of a student yield out of them, but still relatively high for a small area. And then the older homes, we actually have a higher yield rate of 1 student for every 4 homes, which I thought was interesting. So this is a district-wide view of our growth, specifically now and jumping forward to 2032. The teal boxes you see is representative of our total school capacity. So at the bottom, there's all the schools. So if we take Aspen Park Elementary, for example, the total capacity there is the teal block. The red node is our current enrollment, and then the yellow bubble is our future enrollment. So the rule of thumb is you want your node to stay in your box and your teal box and not in the yellow bubble. So going down the line, we have Aspen Park, Brooklyn Elementary, Cumberland, and Valley View as areas where we're seeing that growth surpass our capacity in a way that warrants the district's attention. So this is not news to anybody, spaces that make up a school. This is standard, what you would like to see in an ideal scenario, but because space is an issue and we're not going to get funded for everything that we wish, we have to sometimes convert spaces and relocate them. And we're left more with this type of scenario, which is not the desired effect, but is something that we have to do to show the ministry that we're doing our due diligence, as well as just kind of deal with the problem. But the district as a whole has to think 10 years down the line, 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line. And with that, we have to be really strategic about what we're doing with our spaces. So questions from the ministry that we typically field are something like, is your building in less than a fair condition? One instance where they don't like it to be in a good condition. How utilized and space stressed is the school? So neighborhood schools included in that. Cumberland, perfect example, overutilized. Cumberland, Royston neighboring school, overutilized as well. How severe and long lasting is the shortfall? So is it a blip on our radar, or is it something that we're going to have to shoulder for years to come? Scale and impact of the remedy. So what do we need to do to fix the problem? Are we talking about one portable, a portable farm, which Ian shrinks to hear? We don't like portable farms, but it's something that you have to do sometimes. Has the district reasonably exhausted all available solutions? So have we helped ourselves, essentially?
And I leave these questions up there for a moment because this really speaks to the magnitude of the challenge province-wide, is that we have learned that we will be faced with answering all of these questions, because the fact that good old Valley View is a capacity 365 school, and if it has 375 students there, the ministry will say, have you dealt with it? Because they have schools that are 375 capacity all over the province that have 500 or 550 kids in them. And so we need to ensure, and it's not that they are empathetic, they understand that we have lots of challenges, but they also understand that they only have so much money for the whole province. So we know that these are questions that we really have to answer and be able to speak to, and why in a place like Cumberland, we're looking at an expansion that's quite large, right? Because we have some significant challenges there. Like it's a 545 capacity school with 705 students in it right now. That's a problem. So summary of the challenges, I think Molly, she articulated them well. Cumberland, really big challenge for us, and it's a here and now challenge. We're well over capacity. And then what we refer to as the Comox-Courtenay corridor, and that's as you go from Valley View through to Aspen, through to Brooklyn, and then right through to Airport. 3 of those 4 schools are over capacity. Airport has some space right now, but all that space is really efficiently being utilized. Inclusive education works out of there. They function very well in that space, and it stores some of the really key important material. But the ministry is going to want us to be looking at that and saying, well, why aren't there kids in there? Which ties into a big piece of our decision making around the school board office and why we need to get some additional administration space so we can ensure that admin functions that are happening in schools are pulled into admin space. Aspen Park, Brooklyn, and Valley View, really they're those similar schools, but Aspen and Valley View, because Brooklyn is close to Airport, there may be other ways for us to deal with that challenge, but Aspen and Valley View, we're going to need more space in the longer run there. And so next slide, please, Molly. So when we talk about solutions, we look at this through our annual capital plan submission. It has to logically fit with the data we have. So when we talk to the ministry, and we have applied for expansions at Cumberland, Valley View, and Aspen in our annual capital plan. So that all lines up well. The other thing we need to do is make sure we're looking at our data. Are our boundaries right? Do they fit for the kids? Do they fit for the families? Are they efficiently using our spaces tied back into strategic plan? And our long-range facility plan, which should dictate the overarching courses of action and challenges in our district that provides direction for the board, through to our capital plan. And some growth models cycle. Putting discipline in the process, making sure that we are really drilling down into the data every year, that we're updating our long-range facility plan regularly. It's been updated in 2012, 2016, 2018, and 2021, but we're due. Like the 2021 is interesting, but outdated. So we're going to really put some effort into updating our long-range facility plan. So there's challenges in this district, but we have viable solutions for addressing them. And that is getting some expansions in key locations and ensuring that we're using our resources to the best of our ability. So there's, there's that double-edged sword. It's wonderful to have the growth, to have that vibrancy in the schools, but it brings along some interesting challenges too.
Thank you, Ian.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation, and it's really important when you go back to the numbers, looking where our district is in the province, because we hear about we hear about Surrey, we hear about the interior, we don't hear very much north of Nanaimo, north of the Malahat. So to me, sometimes the ministry forgets what exists out here because we are so efficient. Thank you, Councilor Gray, for all the efficient work that you've done in maintaining our schools and that. But I have a couple of questions to the superintendent. I'm not sure to direct this to. One is, when you look at the long-range facilities plan, our district has a number of grade configurations difference within the school district. We have K to 5, K to 7, K to 9, 9 to 12. And that presents problems in itself. When you look at the modulars and modular cities, when we look at that long-range facility plan, is that going to be part of the conversation that we will have in looking at the entire picture and how that one there, because that will also affect when we go to the ministry, I believe, on asking for some of those extensions and expansions, whether we have one school that has 4 portables, one school that doesn't have any portables. And I look at Courtney L, I look at Arden, and I look at Ecole Putnam, the English, which is K-5, and then you have Lake Trail, which is a different configuration and having space. So that would be, I know it's kind of long, but I think that reflects some of the conversations I think as a district we're alluding to. Am I correct in that assumption?
So I think one of the fascinating pieces, and we're so fortunate to have this MSC 71 as an operations team that really understands the importance of space for educational programming. I think when we look at even some of the rooms that are not necessarily general classrooms, but the tenacious way in which our operations have tried to hold on to them because of the centrality of those flexible spaces for the educational environment. So I think that would be part of the conversation, is making sure that our space needs don't necessarily become the primary what dictates educational outcomes or educational spaces. So it certainly would factor into that long-range facilities plan.
Thank you. Moving on to,
Shannon?
oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. Trustee Aldinger.
And thank you very much for the great presentation. We've had the benefit of seeing it twice now. I'm only now coming up with my question. I'm just curious how the district is responding or turning its mind to the recent announcement by the Minister of Housing that the zoning of single-family properties will be changing to allow for, I think it's up to 4 units on any property without having to go through a rezoning process. I mean, I think the evolution of the data that the district has gotten since 2016 is phenomenal. This is just one more, I imagine, hugely challenging factor to include in analysis going forward. And I don't know if there is an answer to that.
Thank you, Trustee Caton. And I think that what I can do is probably direct that to Russell or.
Sure, we can take a run at it. It's certainly a variable that's outstanding as far as the impact it'll have on attendance, capacity of schools, and the uptake that communities move will be different as well. You're likely going to need to have a new category where we look at a different ratio, but certainly it has the potential of increasing density around schools. From a community planning, that's great, but from our district's perspective, we have many schools that are at capacity now, and how would we deal with that added growth? So I suspect it'll be a case of monitor and see without the requirement for rezoning and all of that. It'll be information that comes at us after decisions have been made. So we'll have to be monitoring it for sure.
Thank you. Okay, number 8, the next open committee, the whole meeting is November 14th, 2023, 7 p.m. School Board Office. And the topic is to be decided. Moving forward to number 9 on the agenda, strategic direction. Over to Dr. Jeremy Moore.
Yeah, thank you. Just would like to give just a couple of anecdotes from the last few weeks that I'll share tonight. First of all, I know that there's going to be some disappointed staff and students that the snow did stop, which is good that I'm not forced to make that decision in October of my first year here in the Comox Valley. But I do want to just say I've just been so appreciative over the last 2 months of all the meetings that I've had, the school visits that I've had, the connections with staff, with community. It's just been such a warm welcome. And I want to just share one of the spots that just really made it such a deep personal connection for me. I was introduced, welcome to connect with our elders, our Ninoxala. And I went and shared lunch with them. First of all, it was great lunch, which was amazing. But I didn't leave. The reason why I say it's a great lunch, because I left with a full stomach, but that's not really what this story is about, is that I left feeling full of their wisdom, full of their input, full of their support. And in fact, I know it's not a typical thing to use in a workplace, but just really a palatable sense of love. And what a treat it was to sit in that space and share time with that group. I wanted to share just a visit I had at Arden Elementary. I do need to confess that it was the second time that I'd been to Arden, but the first time I was supposed to be at Aspen. So I just wanted to point out that this is the first time where I was supposed to be there. And just walking through the school, and it just so happened that I was outside because that's where 3 of the K1 classes were gathered. And they were sitting under some big trees and they were eating their snacks, and it was raining, but they were all dressed for it. And just in talking to those educators for the last 13 years, there's been, two educators 13 years ago and 3 for the last 10 years. They just gather their students together in a collaborative way, and they learn outdoors together until 11:30 every single day. And they don't call it a nature-based program. They don't call it anything special. It's just the way that school is done. And those students return into the building at 11:30 with a different level of self-regulation, and they're engaged. And I just wanted to share that because I think that sort of change and structure to meet the needs of students is a powerful example of what's possible when our 5 guiding principles in Board Policy 1, when the answer is yes, that's what things can look like. So I just wanted to share that. It was just another amazing moment, just a regular morning at a regular school where it was simply amazing. And just having those opportunities to see the joy, the connection, and the passion. I spent a few hours with our staff reps, which are the union representatives of the CDTA, the Comox Valley District Teachers Association. And I was reminded in that meeting, yes, of the challenges, but also of the collective commitment and deep passion that our teachers have in meeting the needs of our students. And so those are just a few of little anecdotes over the last little while, but just so grateful for the opportunities to connect with people who are so passionate about changing outcomes for students. In light of that, we do have in the board package, taking up pages 9 to 26, a focused, the strategic plan with focused strategic priorities for the next 10 months or so, while we engage community in collecting information that will, to collect the information to provide trustees the information needed to make decisions about the next strategic plan. So I would like to call specific attention, I believe it's page 12, it's a little hard to read, but it is of the SD 71 strategic priorities, the focused strategic plan. So we'll be looking for a motion tonight. And the motion that I'll be looking for from the board essentially extends the strategic plan that was designed for 2019 to 2023. It extends it for another year. In recognition of some of the specific and unique components that we need at this moment, there are articulated and really focused specific deliverables and outcomes attached to those priorities over the next number of months. So there's some dates, there's some specific bullets with expectations. With that, that is, if the board does pass that, that is what I am accountable and will be evaluated against is movement towards and accomplishing those expected outcomes. As well, is a number of pages that just makes public the board's work and also makes public the expectations on behalf of staff in terms of reporting and monitoring as we work towards those strategic priorities. So what I would like to just remind, I know our trustees are aware of this, but the public as well, that this is similar to a kind of a technological release where they put out what's called a minimally viable product, and then they iterate and improve as they need to. That's why we get bug fixes and updates on our phones, because they improve things as we go along. And so I would acknowledge, and part of the motion will read, that the document will need to be amended from time to time as we become more aware of some of the specific things that will need to be included to reflect the work that the board is doing. So I don't know if it's the right Robert's rules for me to make that motion and then.
I can't, but I can.
Sorry.
That's all right. Okay, trustee Clayton.
Okay, so I move the following motion, that the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley extend the existing strategic plan to 2024, and that the Board of Education approve the focused strategic plan for the 23-24 school year, and finally, that the Board of Education approve the 2023-24 board working plan as amended from time to time.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Trustee Howe. Thank you. Any discussion?
I was just going to briefly mention, because this was a big decision to make, and I really, to potentially be making, and if the board goes forward with it, I'm hopeful that it gives us the amount of time that is required to truly inform ourselves the way that we need to, and to go through really meaningful consultative process to ensure that the strategic plan is not just, it is the document of the board, but it is through community engagement as much as possible. So that's my discussion piece, that I just am hoping that this gives us the time we need to do good work.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I know we had some conversations about some things that I can see reflected in here now, and I appreciate that part of the motion just did allow us to amend the document from time to time to add updates or anything that was brought to our attention or that was missed. So I appreciate that being part of the motion. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay. Sorry, Shannon?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on some of Trustee Howe's comments, in that I think we're already, like, the draft plan is like already in its next set of amendments already. Like it's truly a living document, and that it's going to be revised like fairly frequently, as it's our first one in some time.
Thank you, Trustee Alder. Okay, I'd like to take a vote. All in favor? Okay. And the motion is carried. Okay. I think we're moving right along to.
It's still me.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, thanks. And I will just say that the intention will, not the intention, this will be a public facing document, so you will be able to see both what we have now and document as it is amended. All right, tonight I have the opportunity just to bring some student data, some student learning data into the room. We're going to do it in such a way that I hope it's relatively engaging. This is where the education side and the secretary treasurer start to blend together, where we put up graphs that are really hard to read and we go really fast through it, so you're not totally sure what's covered. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to make sure that the data we present is understandable, it's clear, and it will just show some trends of student learning within our district. I think one of the pieces that I'll just start with is that student learning data is the beginning of good question asking. And inevitably, when we share data, it leads to further question and more data and further data. So this data today is really high level data. It will show some general trends, as I mentioned. I also want to specify, and I think this is the difficulty and the difference between when we do financial reporting, when we report on things like student data, is that so often our reports that have numbers deal with money or bank sheets or balances. And the fundamental distinction with student data is that it's dealing with human lives and life trajectories. So when we look at improvement, and maybe we say something like we're above provincial average because 75% of our students report feeling safe at school most of the time or all of the time, it also leaves us with that question of 1 in 4 students are then reporting that they feel safe at school none of the time or some of the time. And so I do want to just be reminded of the gravity of every indicator that doesn't say 100%, 100%, 100%, and recognizing that part of the work in our sector is continuous improvement and aspiring to ensure that there is no child in our system that doesn't have every opportunity, every chance, every child, every day. And so I just wanted to share that. So we should be dissatisfied with averages. We should be dissatisfied with micro improvements. And I think one of the pieces and trends that I'll let you know right away is that when we share our student data and we disaggregate between all students and Indigenous students, there's not a single indicator in our district where there's equity of outcome. And the fundamental belief that every child comes with all of the gifts, attributes, and talents to be successful, but the outcomes are not equal. So that calls on us to look at what we can do to change that. So I want to just share a little bit, since most of the slides will look somewhat like this. The circle is where we were at in last year's data set. The line represents the 5-year range of our district. So let's take grade 4, students with diverse abilities, where you can see quite a range in those 5 years, and you can see last year at the bottom of that range. What the gray represents is the average range of the average district in the province. So those would be provincial average ranges. So when you look at all students literacy, this is the FSA results. You would say that we are in the upper side of the provincial average in terms of grade 4 literacy outcomes in this. And when we look at this, this is the group reporting on track or extending in literacy. Okay, so there is here 79% of grade 4 students that wrote the literacy. It's a 79% track participation rate, but also 79% was the, or 77%, sorry, was the on track or extending. You see Indigenous students were at 69%, and students with diverse abilities were at 50%. So 50% of the students with diverse abilities that wrote were on track or extending. When we look at the grade 4 numeracy results with the FSA, you can see the 5-year, it's a fairly tight grouping, and we're at the bottom of that 5-year piece, which is 64% of students that wrote were on track or extending, and 57% of Indigenous students. I'd also point out that the actual discrepancy when we disaggregate data is actually greater if we had a column that said non-Indigenous and Indigenous. So when we do all students, that includes Indigenous students in that, so that the actual when you disaggregate, the discrepancy is actually higher between non-Indigenous and Indigenous students than it would appear there. Just at the bottom, it says math, there's so few, there was too few students writing with diverse abilities, the numeracy component of that exam, that it's math, so we don't see that data. Here's the trend. The trend is, according to the FSA, literacy results in school district 71 are on the decline. That is exactly what the provincial trend is at this time as well. So that mimics our local results, are reflective of what's happening across the province. You can see our grade 7 literacy results, 63% of students in grade 7 are on track or extending, 54% of Indigenous students, 47% of students with diverse abilities in literacy. In numeracy, again, quite a range. And although we've been above provincial average, we've fallen into the top end of the provincial average in grade 7 numeracy results. 55%, 45%, and 43%. Again, generally declining student results within 71, which is also reflective of what's happening provincially around literacy and numeracy. And I think it ties in really nicely to the committee of the whole public presentation around the necessity and the rationale for why we're establishing and working on a comprehensive numeracy and literacy framework and strategy in the district. This is the graduation assessment of both Literacy 10 and Numeracy 10. There is a third graduation assessment, which is Literacy 12, which is that hasn't been going long enough to have comparative data, or even last year's data set hasn't been released yet. So here on the grade 10 proficiency scale, so this is either proficient or extending, you can see 75%, which is right at the end of the provincial average. We are at 62% for Indigenous students and students with diverse abilities at 72%. So students performing relatively well compared to provincially to their peers in the Literacy 10 assessment. We see very similar results in the grade 10 numeracy assessments, either at the right side or all the way past the provincial averages. And so the numeracy data shows, but here's the sad part. So we're above and beyond the provincial sort of mean, which means that in numeracy 10, all students that are proficient or extending in grade 10, 43%, 39% of Indigenous students, and 39% of students with diverse abilities. So just recognizing that while we are above provincial averages, those are fairly low in terms of overall results. I want to share this slide, which is our 6-year completion rate. And this is all students that are connected to our district. And the reason why we've put that in is we have our bricks and mortar schools, we have our alternate schools, and we also have a significant number of students across the province that are part of our student results, which are reflected with NIDES Navigate. So when we look at that 6-year graduation rate, we see provincially that the graduation rate in the 21-22 school year was 91.4%, and in school district 71, it was 80.1%. I would also acknowledge that we have a deeper dive that we're going to be doing internally, which is trying to disaggregate how many students are graduating with an adult dogwood and how many of those students graduating with an adult dogwood are Indigenous and whether we have overrepresentation in those pathways. So I just shared this 6-year grad rate. The next slide, so just picture that. And then if we took out students who are connected with NIDES, and these are not necessarily students that are all on a graduation pathway, a number of them are transient, they're taking 1 or 2 courses and are not necessarily full-time enrolled in NIDES. Our graduation rate without NIDES Navigate is at 88.3%. I wanted to share just a couple of questions from the student satisfaction and wellness. There are more questions that are available publicly, both through the ministry website as well as through our FESL report. Just wanted to highlight a few here. And again, this is where, and I used this example in my opening without knowing I was going to do that, but this is where we see 73% of our students saying that they feel welcome at school in elementary. And when you look at that, it's at the far right of provincial comparators, and it's an improvement. In fact, you see that our literacy numeracy are moving to the left, which would be a decline, and you're seeing our student satisfaction and wellness data moving to the right, which is an improving trend. But when we are at the far right of provincial averages, and where 1 in 4 students are only reporting that they feel safe at school some of the time, or none of the time, that's very concerning that 1 in 4 students are not feeling safe all of the time or most of the time. In secondary, that number, and again, and concerning that even in measures of satisfaction and wellness, we see a discrepancy between Indigenous students and our all-student cohort. So our Indigenous students report feeling safe most of the time or all the time, 67%, so 6% difference between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, non-Indigenous, between Indigenous and all students. In secondary, students report feeling safe 71%, and again, 67% for Indigenous students. Or not feel safe, do you feel welcome? And then do you feel safe at school? Sorry, our elementary students report 79% feeling safe all or most of the time, and our secondary students feeling safe all or most of the time, 84% of the time. I apologize, I inverted the question. So it was, do you feel welcome at school was the beginning, and do you feel safe at school? So that's an encouraging, what's encouraging is not necessarily the final percentage, but the movement to the right. And obviously we would want to see that movement to the right continue. We all know that students that feel safe and welcomed at school have different learning outcomes than students who do not. So that's an area of relative strength that we need to continue to capitalize. I just put this up again. This is another conversation that's happening provincially, which is there is a decline in students who graduate and move to post-secondary institutions in BC. You can see our own trajectory is up and down, as student data often can be, but you're seeing provincially, from 55 to 51%, and that is a concerning trend, concerning enough that the last ministry meeting where superintendents gathered with the ministry, the afternoon also had representatives from most post-secondary institutions in BC looking at that. How do we change that trajectory? One of the pieces that's unfortunate is that this data set does not include students who actually go out of province for post-secondary. So that's kind of an unknown, and so that's another component. And so I just share that post-secondary rate again. I mentioned at the start, these are really high-level pieces that show some trends. I want to just acknowledge that FSA results are not a sole measure of literacy and needs to be triangulated with internal data, which we'll see through our literacy framework, but also needs to be compared to classroom observations. But where FSA and district data serves us is the further back we come. And so when you look at it from a really high level, you can see some trends that are also reflective of what's happening provincially, which is some decrease in those key areas. So I'm open for questions. It's the end of those slides.
Great. So I'll take trustee Howe, then Caton, then Donald Keene.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing the data with us. My only comment would be it looked, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, whoever has the actual numbers, but just some of the answers on some of the, the student numbers that answered some of the questions didn't seem to reflect our population fully. So I look forward to getting more data on that and having some comparatives. So it'd be a better way for us to check it all out and make sure that it's.
So I will indicate on the festival report that's linked, and we can certainly bring some slides here. For the public presentation tonight, I was concerned about having so much information on a slide that it starts to lose its relevance.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
But what we do have in the festival report is actually disaggregated data for Indigenous students on reserve, children and youth in care, children with diverse abilities, and they're all graphed. So when you look at Do You Feel Safe in School, you can actually see which each of those subgroups and groups are reporting. And so there is that level, there is that sort of layered information that's available.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee Caton.
So a question regarding the PSI transition rate and looking at that. My question is with the ministry data, and that is looking at those students who may not go to a public post-secondary institution, but rather go to a trades or technical college and school. And I don't see that reflected in the numbers. And I'm wondering why that would not be part of, because just because you don't go to post-secondary institution, you're going to technical school or trades or that, doesn't mean you're continuing, it doesn't mean you're not continuing on your education. And I think there's a disconnect, and I'm wondering why the Ministry of Education, or are they going to look at those students who go on to a different type of career rather than into a college or university?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's not a ministry issue. It's probably my clarity.
Okay, sorry.
With presenting this slide. No, so this number does include all post-secondary, meaning not just university, but all sort of degree granting, credit granting, credential granting institutions in the province. So there is separate information that shows how many are actually on a university path. So but that's why we should be interested and potentially concerned why only 43% of our students. Now, the other piece is that we just haven't got the disaggregated data yet, but there's also information that we are working on that will show the 3-year transition to post-secondary. So it may be you have a child like my child who's on their second gap year, but may go, and that may be captured in the 3-year transition data, which is another slide, and that has some encouragement in that it should be higher, but it just shows when we think of every student graduating, walking across the stage with dignity, purpose, and options, that only 43% locally are taking some of those options that are available here in BC.
Trustee McConnell-Keen?
Quick, yeah, when I thank you for disseminating the data in such a way that started us off by acknowledging, which can be hard when you're looking at numbers upon numbers upon numbers, which is like human life connecting to those numbers. And that, connecting story to statistic, I think is appreciated. I have a question about how the diverse abilities statistic is categorized, for lack of a better term, whether that, I'm assuming it's not diagnosis based, whether it's more in terms of inclusive ed and children that are requiring support in school or benefiting from support in school.
It would be students who have been identified actually as to be categorized within the system as having either neurodiversity or a learning need.
Great. Okay, thank you very much for that report, sharing. And on to the acting secretary treasurer.
Thank you. So the first item I have for you is a capital plan bylaw that is required for the school food infrastructure program. So starting on page 27 of your package is a letter from the minister. It's a second letter in response to our 2023-24 capital plan. This bylaw is finalizing funding of $105,500 for kitchen equipment that has been installed at a variety of schools. On page 41 in your package is the actual bylaw itself. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you have, and then you have your standard 4 motions to approve a bylaw in front of you.
Any questions? Is there a trustee who would like to move the motion? First one. Trustee Kate?
Okay, so the motion is that the capital bylaw number 2023-24-CPSD-71-02 for the 2023-24 capital plan receive first reading.
Second by trustee Masak. And I believe we're reading the next motion before discussion. No questions. Okay, all in favor? That's carried.
I'll continue that second one, if that's okay, Chair.
Sure.
The capital bylaw number 2023/24-CPSD-71-02 for the 2023-24 capital plan received second reading.
Seconded. We have. Excellent. Excellent. No discussion, all in favor? Excellent. Okay, trustee McConnell-Keen.
But in accordance with section 68(4) of the School Act, all 3 readings of the capital bylaw number 2023-24 CPSD 7102 for 2023-24 capital plan be given at tonight's meeting.
Awesome. And do we have a seconder? Trustee Masak. Any discussion? All in favor? Great, motion carried. And the last motion.
That the capital bylaw number 2023-24 CPSD 7102 for the 2023-24 capital plan receive third and final reading.
And seconded. Trustee Howe. Discussion? All in favor? And motion is carried. And moving on to human resources, I is retirements and recognitions. We have 2 retirements. Katie Doran, principal from Valley View Elementary, is retired effective December 31st, 2023, after 30 years of service. We'll miss you. And Cynthia Nodo, of account, the OL accounts clerk from NIDES is retiring effective October 31st, 2023, after 10 years of service. Thank you so much to both of you for your service in our district. Board standing reports, number 10. The Open Committee of the Whole, October 10th report. Somebody like to move?
Yeah, sure.
Trustee Howe?
Board of Education of School District 71, Comox Valley, received the Open Committee of the Whole report as presented.
And do we have a seconder? Trustee Mesa? Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carried. And board business, trustee remuneration, I believe that's.
Yeah, thank you very much through the chair. So you have a briefing note starting on page 86 pertaining to the trustee remuneration issue. As a reminder for the board, at the February board meeting, there was a motion passed directing the superintendent to form a working group to review the current trustee remuneration and bring back a recommendation to the board. So staff have had an opportunity to look at this motion that was passed by the board, and we also have access to the BC School Trustees Association survey data that they collect annually on remuneration rates from across the province. So we're bringing a proposal to the board for you to consider this in a slightly different way. Attached to the briefing note is data that I've gathered from the survey that BCSDA issued. I've provided you information on sort of the 6 districts that are smaller and then the 6 districts that are larger, give you an indication of where you sit relative to those other districts based on school district size. The briefing note indicates that when we calculate the average for those districts included in the survey, the chair would be at 24,749 and our current chair rate is 19,272. The vice chair average would be 22,861 with a current of 17,400 and trustee rate of 21,523 average, and our current rate is 15,504. The recommendation that staff are bringing forward is twofold. One is that you rescind the initial motion that was passed directing the superintendent. And the second motion being brought forward by staff would be to establish the trustee remuneration rates effective July 1, 2023 to the average of the districts that were surveyed, which are the numbers that I read out. And then further, the motion would cause the remuneration rates to be adjusted each July 1st by the BC Consumer Price Index, all items, with a May to May comparison. So this would result in just an ongoing adjustment of the remuneration rates for trustees based on the Consumer Price Index in British Columbia. So happy to answer any questions trustees may have.
Seeing,
No, I'm just going to make the motion.
okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to make the first
So
one.
there's 2 motions, sorry.
I know.
First one?
First one is that the Board of Education of SD number 71 Comox Valley rescind the motion to establish a trustee remuneration working group.
There's a seconder, trustee Aldinger. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. And the second motion, trustee Caton.
Okay. That the Board of Education of School District 71 Comox Valley establish the following trustee remuneration rates effective July the 1st, 2023. Chair, $24,749. Vice Chair, $22,861, and Trustee, $21,523. And that the Board of Education of School District 71 Comox Valley increase the rates each subsequent, I can't even talk, that word, July the 1st by the BC Consumers Rate Index, all items for the May to May comparison.
Do you have a seconder for the motion? Yeah, trustee Annalkey. And discussion?
I'll speak to the motion. So I've been a trustee on this board for 17 years. In the 17 years I've been a trustee, this board has voted itself for a raise once in 17 years. And a number of years ago, when the Ministry of Finance, the Federal Minister of Finance, changed the taxation, which took 30% that was tax-free to allow trustees to operate, most other districts increased the raise by at least between $1,800 to $3,000. We did a $500 adjustment, which actually, for some trustees, they actually took home less money. Being a trustee should not be for someone who is tired. Being a trustee should not be for someone who has got lots of time at work to take time off work, holidays, expedite. It does, you spend a lot of hours. And I think last month, I think we were looking at maybe 20 hours a week. We spent 20 hours, one weekend of that. There's a lot of time commitment. And I think that if you're a parent, if you have to have childcare or daycare, time off work, you shouldn't be in the negative to become a trustee. That's my thought. And I think this is really, in comparison to other districts, it's not asking a lot. I think that we will be comparison to other districts. Other districts are actually having the conversation that we're having now, looking at trustee stipend and raising and accordingly reflective a number of things. So I think that to have a raise twice in 17 years is really not a lot to ask for, and I think it's in comparison compatible. And I thank our acting secretary treasurer for the work that you did in bringing that information so we can be in compared to other districts. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Caton. Trustee McKenna-Payne.
Yeah, I appreciate that this removes it from our hands because it's an awkward decision to make. We're here for kids. It's an awkward decision, period. So I appreciate your work on this specifically as it reduces that awkwardness for, and I appreciate that I believe that this type of yearly recognition will also hopefully continue to inspire people to want to do public service in any rate, trustee or otherwise, who are working multiple jobs to get by, and there's a generational piece that can't be denied there. So I just, thank you for, I think this will hopefully keep the diverse boards in the making decisions.
Trustee Aldinger, thank you.
Yeah, I also want to start by thanking our Secretary Treasurer for doing this work and getting it done quickly and not requiring a committee to do it. I think this was the most efficient way. I agree with my colleagues' statements that we do a lot of work. It's it's a very time-consuming job, and that it appears our rates are not in keeping with many of the boards of a comparable size. My concern is simply the timing. My strong preference would be that this be a motion that we bring near the end of our term. I think it would be more suited to that timing in relation to the equity and diversity argument, which I think is a very good one, but we currently have our board and it's not a raise at this time is not going to impact the composition of our board. So I am generally in favor of a raise at some point, but not at 1 year into our term.
Thank you, Trustee Aldinger. Okay, seeing no more discussion, all in favor of the motion? Thank you. Motion is carried. Now, the ad hoc policy committee.
Yeah, thank you very much. In your package on page 95 is a briefing note pertaining to the establishment of an ad hoc policy committee. The board had an opportunity to have some conversations during working committees, and there was an indication of looking to establish an ad hoc committee. So we brought before you a proposal to do so. At the top is a section 2 out of your board policy 8 that provides for the creation of ad hoc committees, talks about having terms of reference. It talks about having the chair bringing forward recommended membership, which this briefing note tries to do. So the ad hoc committee would be made up of 2 trustees, superintendent, secretary, treasurer, and the chair, board chair, would be a non-voting ex officio member, as they are of all committees. At the bottom on page 95 talks about the mandate. So first off is to assist the board to fulfill your obligations under policy 2, specifically section 5 that talks about periodic reviews of your policy manual. Review all the policies, make recommendations on any new proposed or new policies that are required. And then also to provide support through the superintendent's office around any amendments to administrative procedures that may connect back to the policy manual. The recommendation is that the meetings occur monthly and that they report back through either the committee of the whole, likely the committee of the whole that would then come to the public meeting for circulation of any motions. So we have a recommended motion for you, one that establishes the committee in terms of reference, and second, that the board accept the board chair's recommended membership for the committee for the 23-24 school year.
Okay, Trustee Howe?
I can just make that and then we can discuss. The Board of Education of School District 71, Comox Valley, establish an ad hoc policy committee based on the terms of reference contained herein, and that the board accept the recommended committee membership for the 2023-24 school year as provided by the board chair.
Okay, and Trustee Masak seconded. Discussion?
I just had a comment. I just wanted to thank you for putting this together so quickly, and I was really happy to see a couple new trustees sitting on the committee. I think it's exciting. I know there's a few of us that have sat on committees like this in the past, so I know we were all passionate about it, and I'm excited to see that you two are sitting there representing us, and look forward to the work that you're going to do.
Yeah.
My pleasure to put the superintendent's name on the briefing.
Yeah, I bet it was. I bet it was.
Excellent. Okay, all in favor? Excellent, and motion is carried. Okay, and next is trustee report for the IEC, which is mine. It is enclosed, but I will just mention some of the important bits. One being that tomorrow is the IEC annual general meeting, and it's being held on October 25th at Courtney Elementary School. And that is, I believe, when all the elections will take place. So do encourage community to come out and attend. Also of note is Jay Dixon shared the district's plan to begin a fulsome consultation process regarding the creation of the new strategic plan. And much discussion ensued on meaningful ways to connect and listen to Indigenous community stories and experiences in Comox Valley schools. Of note, the LA Oversight Committee met on October 13th and spent the day together sharing roles, responsibilities, and key actions needed in supporting Comox First Nation students in a good way. And I'll finish off by saying, this is amazing. Comox First Nation Early Learning Collaborative with School District 71, a drop-in Strong Start pilot program is being offered in the new year, 1 day a week on reserve, and is open to KFN children and the general public. Okay. Now I lost my track. I have to go find my other page. Okay. Next on trustee reports is a report on Vista from Janice Caton.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of, just a brief update for those of us who attended Vista, and people can add to it on that one there. So past 2 weekends ago, we had a meeting in Nanaimo with Vancouver Island School Trustees Association. There was about 75 trustees, superintendents, and district staff from across the island that met. And there's a couple of things that came out of that. And one, I think, is tied to what we heard our superintendent speak tonight, was regarding the data. And we had a presentation from a gentleman from FNESC talking about how data is extremely important, and the way of collecting it and reading it and how the school district is using it is that was. So that kind of tied into what we had tonight. And that's something that FNESC is working with BCSTA and having those conversations and the data and how to use it. And the other one was a heartbreaking but very informative presentation from Dr. Charles Rith, our child and youth advocate, and talking about the a lack of mental health supports within our entire ministry and school system society, and the impact that's having on our students. And that the Vista branch will bring forward in bringing a motion asking the Ministry of Education to look at how we can really advocate to supporting student mental health. And the fact is, depending on where you live, depending if you have a family doctor, the family and resources, the wait time to get help is long. Some cases, and especially in some of the provinces, the rural areas, almost non-existent, and that has impact on their schools and their schooling. So I thought that her presentation on the facts of the mental health of our students, especially youth in care, and the other presentations we had within the districts with youth and child care was quite, it was very heartbreaking to hear some of the actual cases and children falling through the crack, and the number of students being impacted by mental health and other issues, and the number of students who, when you think of the drug epidemic, and the opioid epidemic, the number of students who have both parents been impacted by that drug overdose. And these are not people, you think of downtown East Side and that one, these are mums and dads who are leaving their 6 and 7, 8-year-olds orphans because of the drug epidemic. And that's something that the awareness and the conversations we have to have as a community and as a school district. And I know that our Director of Inclusion, Sean Larmour, you've been working extremely hard with members of our community. And it's one of the things that we need to make people aware of, that necessity on that one. So that's my takeaway from that. And I'm sure my other colleagues have other takeaways on that one there, but I just wanted to bring that forward because I think those are conversations at the provincial level and the island level. We need to be open and honest and have those conversations about the mental health and the drug epidemic and how it's impacting many of our students and families and community members.
Thank you, Trustee Caton. Would anybody else like to comment?
Yeah, it was a very, I don't know what their proper word is, it's very deep, full, like one of the things that one of your colleagues at Vista brought up was she said that it was one of those times they really felt in the sessions, the 2 days of learning, that we found a healthy balance of professionalism and heart, and how the intersection between like the professional and personal work are one and the same in this, and the type of work and the equity piece that we are so deep diving into right now as an entire ministry. And I guess, it was a really wonderful 2 days. One thing I really appreciated, and thank you to Janice and the rest of the Vista members, Vancouver Island School Trustees Association, is that the FNESC, as Janice was saying, First Nations Education Steering Committee conference, is like has 400 people on their wait list, they said. So to have a small presentation specific to some of the learning that may come forward from there, although we're delighted to have one of our members of our board attending and other Indigenous support workers and educators in our district. I'm really grateful that you guys were able to have somebody come and do a small presentation of what you may see come at that conference to come, because it's wonderful to see that it's so full. I wish they had more of them. So yeah, thanks, Janice. It was a great learning time.
Trustee Howe, did you have your hand up?
Don't get me started on the topic.
And number 12 is our board correspondence, and we have none, which brings us to our public question period.
We have received no questions.
We have received no questions, which brings us to adjournment. We'd like to make that motion, unless.
Motion to adjourn?
From the floor. Okay. Okay. Yep.
Motion to adjourn? Yep.
Excellent.
Thrice.
Excellent. And a seconder on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, Caton, Howe and Caton, and all in favor? And it's carried. Okay.